Hello, this is manic.mercurian with manic.mercurian.net, and I have another birth chart reading for you. Quick reminder before we get into the reading, if you are interested in information on readings or if you'd like to purchase a reading, you can do all that and more at www.manic.mercurian.net. I really do appreciate all of you who have gotten readings because, this is kind of what allows me to keep up the channel and, post new videos and things like that. My current rate is $30 United States currency. So if you're interested in getting a reading, definitely hit me up. You can also email me manic.mercurian@gmail.com. Okay, so for this reading, this will be for Sunday, April 11th, 1999 at 4:55 a.m. in Brooklyn, New York. So this means that you have Sun in Aries, Moon in Aquarius with Pisces rising. So definitely a pretty dynamic mix there right off the bat. I think the first thing that stands out to me when I look at this chart is combining Aries and Aquarius makes you very independent. You're probably very acutely aware of your eccentricities, your uniqueness, because you have a very different approach to things. You kind of do things your own way. You probably always have sort of done things your own way and had your own opinions about things. You are an independent thinker for sure. What strengthens this is Moon is not only in Aquarius, but it's conjunct Uranus. It's also conjunct the South Node, and this is all in the 12th house. So all of that means that, you're very eccentric, very independent. You probably have had multiple times in your life where you have huge revelations, huge realizations, and you have a very vivid inner world. Much more so than most Aries Sun people would be. You probably do have a lot of classic Aries traits of, being independent, like we talked about, being outgoing, being kind of assertive. All those traits come with Aries Sun typically. But this dynamic with, Moon and 12th house Aquarius, this means that you're also you're very thoughtful, very reflective. You're kind of constantly in your own inner world, so to speak. And at times you could probably be very withdrawn. So I think this combination of energies in your chart indicates that you can kind of range the full spectrum. You can be very outgoing, very assertive, very confident. What else? Very spontaneous. But at times you can also be withdrawn. You may be prone toward periods of like melancholy or depression. Those are common when you have major placements like Moon and South Node in the 12th house. The 12th house is a pretty difficult house to have major, placements like that in. The advantage, though, is that especially with time, there's the potential for a really impressive amount of self-awareness that comes from Moon and South Node in 12th house. Putting this in, like considering that this dynamic is in 12th house Aquarius, this makes you kind of detached, so you have the ability to really detach from yourself and observe yourself, especially emotionally. It may actually be very difficult for you to experience emotions because you immediately disconnect from the feeling. You want to observe patterns and understand yourself and your environment. You want to break things down and kind of analyze everything. Aquarius is an intellectual sign. So it's very interesting that, I think many people who don't know you as well, they won't see all that. They'll just see the Sun in Aries, or they might see your Pisces ascendant. We can talk more about that too in a moment. But others may see you as being relatable, outgoing. Sometimes they may not understand you though, because, I think when people get a little bit deeper with you, many of them won't understand you because Moon conjunct Uranus in Aquarius means that you're very much unique and an individual. You're very different from everyone else, so not everyone will be open to understanding that. But also Moon in the 12th house means that you understand other people much, much better than they understand you. How else can I put that? Moon in 12th house means that you're very empathetic. You probably always have been, very sensitive. But because you're so self-reflective and you have such self-awareness, the more you go inside yourself and delve into that like spiritual understanding, and that really going deep into yourself like that, mentally and maybe emotionally, it will allow you to have better self-awareness, and then that will therefore allow you to understand other people much better. You could probably read other people very well, but also the more you go in that direction, the less other people will tend to understand you, because they may not have done that level of self-reflection. They might, most people don't require that level of self-awareness to go through life and enjoy life. You know what I mean? So neither approach is better or worse. It's just different. You've chosen in this life to be very self-aware and really question things and think for yourself. So in short, with a chart like this, you probably understand other people much better than they understand you, generally speaking. In a way that could allow you to be almost like a master manipulator, but what you do with that is up to you. Let's talk about the Pisces rising. We haven't really talked about that, because you do have some major placements in Pisces, not only ascendant, but also Mercury. So this means that you come across like a Pisces, you initiate like a Pisces, and you think and communicate like a Pisces. So what does that mean? Typically when you have Pisces rising, it makes you very approachable. So others may, they see you as non-threatening. They see you as approachable. So it's really interesting. You have a mix, Pisces rising and Sun in Aries both suggest that you're very approachable. Others feel comfortable around you. They feel like they can understand you very well. But then on the other hand, Moon conjunct Uranus and the South Node in 12th house Aquarius suggests that deep down you are a puzzle. You're complex, you're intelligent, you are spiritual. You can be withdrawn at times, very reflective. So all of that suggests that you could be kind of a loner. So whenever there's seemingly contradicting placements in the chart, I kind of just put it out there because both can be true. You may understand that. You may have times where, you are outgoing. You could be the life of the party even. But then there's other times where, you feel alienated. No one truly understands you. They may understand you on a surface level much more so than deep down. I think it may be much more convenient for many people to just understand this shallower version of you than actually taking the time or thought or feeling to understand like the deeper you. I know that sounds really deep and kind of vague, but with a chart like yours, there's that kind of mix or contrast for you. Excuse me. But back to Pisces. Mercury in Pisces is interesting because it's in detriment and fall. So it's a very challenging placement. Especially when you're younger, it may be difficult to put your thoughts into words or communicate. It may be difficult. Oftentimes when you have Mercury debilitated like this, it can be difficult to participate in school or academics, for instance, because you don't always think in a linear way. You think in a more intuitive way. You're thinking maybe more scattered or seemingly like quote unquote backward compared to what's taught in school, for example, where it's very linear. Also with Mercury debilitated like this means that you're more open to strange or frowned upon ideas. So ideas that may not be the mainstream narrative. Like astrology is a great example. I always use that. With a placement like Mercury and Pisces, you'd be more open to something like astrology, which, I think the consensus is that astrology is a pseudoscience and it's not worth your time. So something like that, you wouldn't think twice about it because again, you're very much an individual. Your Aries placements, your Aquarius placements, and even Mercury and Pisces, they all suggest that you do your own thing, especially mentally and emotionally, I guess, but especially with ideas and information, just because the, common consensus is against a certain idea, or if an idea is controversial, you would still hear it out. You would still be open to it. And I think this kind of sets you up to be a truth seeker, which can be difficult because you may be open to a lot of truths and understandings that are not popular or that are not accepted. Occult information, controversial subjects, you speculating based on your placements, you probably enjoy, getting really deep into different matters. You like questioning things. The reason why I say that is a combination of Pisces Mercury, but also, you have really strong Aquarius energy too. So all of that suggests that you don't mind, doing your own thing. And this can actually make you, like, the more you delve into truth seeking and understanding these, like, truths that no one else knows, or information that no one else pays attention to, or maybe they don't embrace it, the more you delve into that direction, the less you will share beliefs with other people in general. So this can be very isolating too, which is another major theme in your chart. So it can be very difficult, I think, for you, leading your own path. On the other hand, though, it looks like you're set up to do that. You may even enjoy the level of solitude and independence, because again, that was the very first thing I said with your chart, that there's a really clear desire for autonomy, a need for autonomy. So on some level, you may not mind the isolation that comes from being a truth seeker. So just putting that out there. But what else? Mercury's in the first house too. Typically, whenever a planet is in the first house, it is kind of strengthened. It's very, its traits are more obvious, and its traits kind of permeate into your personality more so. So I think having, Mercury, which has everything to do with learning, communication, information, details, analysis, having that in your first house means that, that's all of that is a lot of what you're here to do. And so already just, almost 12 minutes into your reading, there's multiple indicators which show that I think you're meant to be a truth seeker. You want to blaze your own trail, blaze your own path, really with everything you do, but especially mentally, especially with information. And Mercury in the first house, it just means that learning is very important to you. Information is very important. A lot of what you're meant to do here is learn. But again, Mercury's debilitated. So the way you are going to learn and the information you come across and are open to is going to be very different than what most people would be. It's very different than the way most people would experience learning or information. Like, for example, if Mercury was in first house and it was in Virgo or Gemini, you'd probably be much more focused on learning the consensus, learning what is thought to be true, learning the facts. But because Mercury's in Pisces, it takes on a more spiritual, metaphysical context. Like conspiracy theories, occult information, stuff like that. Pisces rising means that the way you approach life is somewhat directionless, because you're just so open. You're open to many different paths. There's kind of a shapelessness and formlessness that comes with Pisces. So it makes you malleable. It makes you very open to a very wide array of experiences. I think combining that with Sun in Aries and Moon in Aquarius makes you even that much more open, because these are two very yang signs, meaning that they're both very experimental. They like to be kind of radical and, try something new. Both enjoy being on the frontier, so to speak, adventuring, going to some new territory. So combining all these energies, it's a really excellent setup for being a truth seeker, forging your own path, that type of thing. I'm sure that's not the last you'll hear me talk about, just because, when you look at a chart, a lot of what reading a chart is just noticing patterns. So right away, that's, those are some major patterns that come up with your chart a lot. Independence, autonomy, the juxtaposition of being very maybe charismatic at times, but also kind of a loner. And then probably most importantly and most ubiquitously is learning unique information, having your own opinions, coming across maybe some very dark truths or truths that other people are not open to or privy to. So that's kind of the main general focus that I see with your chart. It's mostly focused on Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries. That in itself is a little bit interesting, because Aquarius and Pisces are the last two signs. Aries is the first sign. So, this is kind of centered around this part of the chart, which has everything to do with like regeneration and starting a new cycle. So there's a lot of passion in this part of the chart, especially Pisces and Aries. But combining that with Aquarius adds this whole like really intellectual, detached foundation that you have, that you are venturing into the world from. And I think the two go hand in hand. You may be very passionate about learning, but like the more detached and open to information you are, the more information you may come across that you may feel passionate about. So the passion and the detached logic for you go hand in hand. They build on each other, I think. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, what else can we talk about here before we get into the deeper parts of the reading here? I think that's the main things I wanted to talk about for this first kind of chapter, so to speak. I think that's a good start. So let's go into the next part of the reading. So next, this is kind of like your karma for this part of the reading. We're going to talk about your past life themes, which you do have some particularly interesting themes going on with that. I'm going to explain that in a minute. We're also going to talk about your upbringing, your childhood, and then major challenges that you're experiencing in this life, and then where you're going from there, the direction that you are evolving, what you're kind of working on in this life. So let's start out with past lives, since that's, I guess chronological sort of. So for this, I mostly look to the south node. Your south node is at 20 degrees Aquarius. It's opposing the north node at 20 degrees Leo. And your south node is conjunct the moon. So this is actually one of the very first things I noticed with your chart, because it's an interesting dynamic. So for anyone, south node, indicates past life themes that you've experienced and really delved deep into. And so coming into this life, you've sort of already mastered that area. For you, though, it's more extreme because your south node is conjunct the moon. So let me just tell you what I mean. So south node conjunct the moon in 12th house Aquarius. This really suggests that, I'll be kind of blunt. So the when I first saw this, to me, it looks like you may have like messed up kind of big time in a past life. That's one way of putting it. A different way of putting it would be just to say that you went very extreme in one direction. So that direction would have to do with definitely solitude and isolation, but it's also Aquarius. So Aquarius has to do with the inventor, the mad scientist, the genius. So in a past life, you may have been someone who wanted to help the world or change the world, but did so indirectly. So you may have been like a scientist in a laboratory or a doctor. You may have been an inventor working in like a basement. So there's this kind of contrast of, you may have known a lot about the world and society. You may have been a very influential person who changed society, but you did so not directly. You did so, you may have spent most of your time alone, for example, creating something that changed the world, like writing a book or creating a cure for a disease, or what else? Creating an invention, something like that. Any of those archetypes, being the genius, being the inventor, the creator of something new which changed the world, but from a place of isolation and solitude. So this may have been, very excellent. You may have done something very good. I can't see morality with these charts. You know what I mean? So, you may have been someone who created something that made the world worse, or you may have dramatically improved the world. I can't see that because that depends on free will. But the themes that you dealt with in a past life have to do with mostly just that. But the reason why I say that, there are extremes there is because you went very far in that direction. You may have been completely isolated. So, moon conjunct the south, though, just means that coming into this life, it really shows that you've more than mastered that area. You went very extreme in a past life, or maybe multiple past lives. So coming into this life, you still have that energy. You still have that knowledge or experience of those themes. So basically, typically when you have South Node in Aquarius, you're the prodigy. You're the child genius. You start out life very mature and logical, very rational, much like an Aquarius. But because Moon is conjunct the South Node in Aquarius for you, it just strengthens all of that even more. So this means that, again, especially considering that Moon is in 12th house, which has to do with solitude, isolation, spirituality. This means that as a kid, you were, it's like you were still retaining that theme of being like a mad scientist or an inventor. It's like you were still experiencing that in a way as a child in this life, if that makes sense. So very rational, very intelligent, very observant as a child. And others may not have understood you because you were very, what's the word? You were very, like ahead of your time. Very, I'm forgetting the word, but, when a child is, very mature, it can actually make you a little bit rebellious. But because this is 12th house we're talking about, you may have been very withdrawn as a child. Very, these are very alienating energies. It's really great that you could be very intelligent, very, ahead of your peers and things like that. But it's also extremely alienating. This is a theme we've already talked about that you're dealing with in your life in general. But I think this would be especially acute, especially dominating your life at a young age. Very intelligent, child prodigy, but others may have not understood you. You may have been on your own a lot. What else? And there's also a lot of detachment there too. When you have so much detachment as a child, especially, it makes, whenever you're very detached and you have a lot of air energy, it makes it so you're not as relatable. Looking at your chart, it looks like you'd be much more relatable to other people later in life. But two placements which really indicate how you were as a child and what your experience was like are South Node and IC. The IC is in Gemini and the South Node is in Aquarius. Both of these are air signs, so they both indicate, a lot of intelligence as a child, but not a lot of feeling. You may have been disconnected from your own emotions. You may have felt like you didn't have emotions at all, actually. It may have been that extreme as a child. And this is I think it's very unusual because typically children are emotional. They're, we picture children as out of control. They're very spirited, very wild, very emotional, very unhinged kind of. You wouldn't have been like that at all. You would have been more like an adult, or what an adult should be, more mature, logical, cerebral, detached, observant, all of that. But let's talk about your South Node more and then some of the challenges that you deal with in this life. So because you went so far into these Aquarius 12th house themes in past lives, the solitude, the isolation, the geniusness, the invention, or what have you, because you went so far in that life, it makes your strengths, it makes your initial or innate strengths and weaknesses in this life more extreme. So, for instance, it may be very comfortable for you to be isolated and to be, to learn about the world indirectly. Like one person, I forget where I got this from, but you'd be more like the astronomer, not the astronaut, at least initially. That's what you're more comfortable with. You're more comfortable learning about the world from a book or maybe from a video or, reading something, watching something, looking at statistics rather than, like you may be learning about a country and reading all the statistics about it, the demographics and the climate, but you may be less comfortable with, actually going there, actually going in the world and experiencing something. I think that may be scary for you. It may be, it's out of your comfort zone. And I should just mention, all of this is very unusual for having Aries sun. Most Aries are not like this. So in a way, having Aries sun does indicate that you do have some level of, assertiveness and wanting to plunge into things. So I think that's kind of good. It kind of balances things a little bit. It will help your evolution to connect with your sun more so. So your ego, your outer identity, the identity, the part of you that's more shallow, that is more hands-on, that deals with the world more so. the more you kind of deal with that more external part of yourself, it will help you to grow and evolve. The reason why is because Sun is in Aries, which is a fire sign, and your North Node, which has everything to do with the direction you're going, the evolution, that's in 6th house Leo. So basically the way I see this working is South Node is in 12th house Aquarius. You're more comfortable taking on that theme that you did in past lives of being alone, maybe helping the world, but, doing so in a basement or, doing something in a very solitary kind of way. That may be comfortable for you, and there are a lot of great strengths there. It's excellent that you can learn so much, through indirect means. And that there is a huge amount of intelligence that comes with these placements as well. That's just innate for you. You've always had it. You're excellent when it comes to learning and obtaining information, being detached and thinking holistically about the entire picture. All of that is excellent, but what the nodal axis is asking you to do in this life is combine those strengths, which are, again, very intense strengths that you have. It's almost kind of intimidating, but combine that with the themes of North Node in 6th house Leo. So it's great to learn about things, but also, apply that to the real world. Go out and learn firsthand. Maybe help someone in a more direct way, in a hands-on way. This is going to initially be uncomfortable for you. It's not your comfort zone. It's not what you've dealt with in so many past lives. Having Moon conjunct the South Node makes all of this more relevant for you and initially more difficult, but in the long run more worthwhile. There's more potential there for you. So all that information that you've learned, that intelligence, if you can use that in a hands-on way to help people or, directly change the outcome, directly improve the world somehow, that's kind of, much of your task, I think. Part of it, too, is learning to operate more from a subjective standpoint. So, where's the passion in it? It's great to have information, and it requires a certain level of detachment to obtain and digest the level of information that you have and will continue to have. But if you're only detached about the information, then it can only go so far. There has to be some level of passion in order to know what to do with the information. Do you want to pass on the information you've learned, teach other people? Do you want to use the information to help other people in some kind of way? These are the themes that are brought up by this nodal axis. So this is, like I said, this is a huge area of challenge for you, but over time, this will become easier. You've definitely already experienced, around the age of 18, 19, you may have experienced a lot of these themes of coming out of your shell, connecting with your emotions more so, maybe becoming less solitary, less isolated, more engaging physically with the world. A lot of that, it will come up for you gradually as you mature and get on later in life, but especially around the age of 18, 19, this will become, again, especially relevant around the age of 27, because these are when you have your nodal returns and nodal oppositions. So, that gets a little bit technical. I could talk about that later or in another video, but that's basically the gist of it. Okay, so we talked a lot about that. Since we're talking about, we're kind of all over the place right now, but let's talk about challenges, because we already talked about some major challenges for you and then where you're going. Another placement that we can look to for, the challenges and your evolution and your soul growth, you probably already know it, is your Saturn. So Saturn is in 2nd house Taurus. This indicates that, this is really interesting because it kind of contradicts some of your other astrology. Typically, when you have Saturn in Taurus, it's difficult for you to know how to support yourself and be autonomous, especially in a long-term way. So combining that with these other placements in your chart, we've already talked about how you have Sun in Aries, Moon in Aquarius. You have a really high amount of independence and autonomy. You want to be independent. You want to do your own thing. You don't want to be controlled by anyone. But on this, on the other hand, or at the same time, it's difficult for you to really feel secure in your autonomy in a long-term sense. That desire is there, that passion is there, and you have, much of your personality is naturally autonomous, and yet at the same time, you don't feel a lot of security in it. So you may feel like you have to constantly change. You're constantly like looking for this security, looking for a foundation, looking for some kind of consistency. Consistency may be kind of difficult for you. All this is a little bit contradictory, because on the one hand you could be very stubborn and very autonomous, but on the other hand you may lack consistency. You may be very spontaneous, and you may feel insecure with your especially long-term autonomy, and feeling truly stable and grounded. Not just like, for instance, it may be a lot easier for you to be autonomous in a almost kind of rebellious sort of way. I'm not going to do what anyone tells me. I'm living my truth, and all that is excellent. There are strengths there too. It's good for you to be autonomous, but then are you actually grounded in that? Do you feel secure? Is it something that you can rely on or be assured of in the long term, I guess? That's what Saturn and Taurus brings about. Part of this could be financial as well. Could be emotional too. But that's what second house and Taurus have to do in general, is knowing how to support ourselves in a long-term way. So that could be an area of struggle for you, especially early in life. But wherever Saturn is, we typically get better at this over time. You may have some kind of crisis or difficult situation. There may be one in your early 20s, like 21, 22, and then especially later in your late 20s, 28, 29, 30. Those are very pivotal years for facing challenges, having mostly to do with supporting yourself in the long-term way. These challenges may come up, you may have to face them, and then but they're pivotal years for overcoming those challenges as well, getting stronger. This is how you become stronger in that area. And like I always say, I do paint a semi-optimistic outcome, because that's what happens for most people. Most people, they get into their 20s, definitely 30s and beyond, and they start to kind of master the area their Saturn is in. So for you, of course, free will always is a variable. But for you, the main trajectory I see is, you may initially be a little bit insecure with supporting yourself long term. Of course, we all are. But for you especially, this may be a major theme. But, it just takes time, and this will eventually be an area of really great strength for you. That's what typically happens. Because you've gone through the trials and tribulations of creating your own sense of security and peace, it all the better. I always feel like I struggle with explaining this, but it's almost like, because you go through that struggle of creating that security for yourself, it makes that security all the stronger once you do achieve it. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, that is interesting, because it's a very different placement than what else is going on in your chart. You have actually no other. Well, you do have Venus and Taurus. We'll talk about that later, but really not a lot of Earth placements. Okay, so yeah, we talked a lot about your past lives. We talked about a lot of challenges for you initially, but I think hopefully I've painted the picture of how those challenges will. Those challenges are also areas of major potential for you. So in short, you have the potential to, on the one hand, be very secure within yourself and have a very deep level of confidence, knowing that you are secure, you have stability, you know how to support yourself in the long run. So that will develop over time. And then also, I think even more importantly for you, like, of course that's important because it's a foundation, but in a way, something more important that has more to do with the rest of your chart is eventually learning how to interact with the world more hands-on, learning from the world hands-on, helping people hands-on, applying your very impressive amount of knowledge and information, applying that hands-on. I don't know how you feel about that, if that's cringy for you, or maybe you've already made a lot of progress and are already starting to embrace that. But, initially that's going to be an area that's uncomfortable, but there's always potential where the North Node is. There's potential for a great amount of success there. And again, one last thing, I already mentioned this a little bit, but because your moon is conjunct the South Node, it indicates that potential is even stronger. So you have the potential to really help the world, really help people in a very profound way, in a very strong way. I don't know exactly how, but I know it most likely has something to do with information. In other words, understanding the world from a detached and, there's a lot of value in that understanding, but especially if you bring that level of understanding and then actually go out into the world and apply it, that can be very impressive, very profound, very impacting for other people. Anyway, so those are your major challenges, potential past life karma. Let's talk a little bit about your upbringing and your childhood. We already kind of touched on that a little bit. Moon, IC, and South Node are all in air signs, so this indicates a very detached, very intellectual upbringing. Sorry about that, my laptop died, but we're back. So I was just going to talk about your childhood a little bit more. I was just saying how Moon, South Node, and the IC are all in air signs. So this suggests that your childhood was very detached. You may have been very intellectual, very cerebral, like we talked about. And I think there's kind of this juxtaposition that comes with this heavy amount of air energy in your childhood that indicates, on the one hand, you may have been around different people all the time, different ideas, different information. Things may have been constantly changing a lot. But on the other hand, you may have had a lot of time alone too. This is something that keeps coming up in your chart. This is common when you have IC and Gemini, that you may have had a very vivid imagination, very active mind, but a lot of time alone. So you may have had a lot of imaginary friends. You may have talked to yourself. These things are common in children when you have IC in Gemini. Very interesting. And I think I was just mentioning how typically the ascendant has to do with what our parents expect of us. So for you, your parents may have expected, they wanted you to be a kind person. They wanted you to be wise and have common sense, and much of what they wanted from you and expected from you was emotional in nature. So they wanted you to be, they wanted you to have good character. So it's interesting that a lot of this focus on learning and intellectualism may have just come from you. It was not necessarily something that was pushed on you from your parents. I could be wrong about that, but that's, to me, what your chart suggests. This is something that comes from you independently, not so much your parents, if that makes sense. But yeah, definitely very intellectual, very intelligent as a child. Looking at the sun and the moon, they do sextile one another. So your parents may have had enough in common that they had a somewhat harmonious relationship. They were, there was some level of consistency. Well, on the one hand, the heavy air focus in your, these placements that have to do with childhood show a lot of constant change in your upbringing, especially with ideas and information. But on the other hand, Sun and Moon sextile each other shows that the environment was harmonious growing up. At least that's the main probability. And whether you grew up with just one parent or both parents, they parented you with some level of consistency, so you knew what was expected from you. But there was enough contrast and difference that it made you somewhat malleable at the same time. So enough consistency for you to be confident, but enough variation for you to be open to new ideas, open to change. This kind of boosts the empathy a little bit, and as well as your ability to understand complex concepts. You kind of have the best of both worlds there a little bit. So all in all, it looks like I can never say these things for sure, but judging off your chart, it looks like your childhood was pretty decent. At times, there may have the environment for you may have lacked the emotional nurturing that we may typically prefer, for our upbringing. Childhood is a time of vulnerability, so there, typically there's kind of a motherly figure that, nurtures us. So you may not have had that so much. Things were a little bit more emotionless or detached. But other than that, it looks like it was a generally favorable environment for you. Saturn's direct, Sun is exalted in Aries, so it looks like your father was very present in your life. Your mother may have been less present, or she may have suffered with depression or mental disorders. Something may have happened where she was absent. This absence could have been like mental or emotional. Something interesting though is that Moon in 12th house suggests that you do have psychic abilities, and specifically these psychic abilities were inherited from your mother's side of the family. So probably from your mother, as well as maybe other relatives on that side of the family. And I think it's interesting that with 12th house placements there is, or just in general, when you have psychic abilities, I think oftentimes there's some level of mental instability or depression, things like that come with or seem to be present in the same people that have that psychic awareness. So this is relevant for you as well as your mother and maybe other members of the mother's side of the family as well. But yeah, it looks like your father would have been more consistent, more straightforward, more present in your life the way a traditional father would be. He filled the kind of the masculine, parental role for you in a traditional kind of way. And of course, I could be wrong, but that's all what your placements suggest to me, the way I see it. Okay, let's talk about your career a little bit. What do I see you doing for work? What are your needs, career wise, and what does your reputation look like? What kind of jobs would you thrive at? So by this point, we've already talked about some of your strengths. You're great with information, you, especially with really complex or unusual, provocative information. Definitely a deep thinker, so that, could be something intellectual in nature for sure. What else? That's the main strength for sure. And then you'd also thrive with positions which require some level of solitude or isolation. I think that's what you'd be most naturally comfortable with. But like I talked about earlier, something that would really help you expand and grow would be something that's also more physical in nature. So if, in a perfect world, I think it'd be great to have a position that deals with some level of both, maybe like dealing with complex information, researching something, learning about something, but then applying it, helping people in some way or teaching people, something like that. For more specific information, we can look to the midheaven. Midheaven is in Sagittarius, and this to me is where it gets kind of interesting. Jupiter rules your midheaven. Not only that, but Jupiter also rules your ascendant and your Mercury. And Jupiter's in Aries, which is the same sign as your sun. So that may sound like gibberish. I'm not sure how astrologically astute you are. But basically what that means is a lot of what you're meant to do, not only in life in general, but also in your career, is having to do with deep information. Philosophy, spirituality, could have to do with religion, could have to do with higher learning as well. So, you could be in the university, the church, whatever the place is for your higher learning, you may spend a lot of time there. And excuse me, and with midheaven in Sagittarius and Jupiter in Aries, it shows that I think it's likely for you to succeed in a career where you're dealing with something that you're very passionate about. This is something very close to your ego, your identity. This is something that you're personally passionate about. I think many, if not most people, have a career that they may not be so intimate with. They may not be so passionate about it, but for you, it looks like there's a lot of passion there for sure. Also, Pluto in Sagittarius, close to the midheaven, suggests that whatever you do for work and in public, you really want to go all the way. You want to you want to go real deep into it and really explore the depths. I think you require a lot of authenticity with your career. So, it's not going to be good enough or satisfying enough for you to do, like a regular day job. I could see you being a professor or a preacher of some kind. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to be religious. Maybe you are, maybe you're not, but preaching in some kind of way. Like, for example, even what I'm doing is almost like preaching, with my channel and stuff like that. So it could be something like that, something where you're dispersing information, where you have a group of people that you are teaching or lecturing in some kind of way. Something like that is what I see for you. So preacher, teacher, and like I said in the last reading, the whole point of this part of the reading is not for me to try to guess what your meant to do, or guess what you are currently doing for work. When I say these jobs, I'm working at painting or illustrating what themes I see you being meant to deal with professionally. So teacher or preacher are two great examples that they encapsulate all these major themes that I see of you, wanting to help people with the information you've learned. Working in an area that you're very passionate about that has to do with information or philosophy. Do you see what I'm saying? So teacher, professor, priest, or something. And maybe you're not religious. It could have to do with spirituality. You could be on, I don't know, there's even people on like YouTube, social media. But on the other hand, I do think it would be more preferable if it was something in person, though. North Node in, 6th house Leo. So teacher, priest, pastor, professor, anything that allows you to spread information, help people through knowledge, spirituality. And again, really go far with that. You want to get real, sometimes you may be discussing things that are dark in nature, but meant to help people, something like that. With this heavy Aquarius theme for you, as well as North Node and 6th house, both of these show that you're meant to help people. You want to fix things. You want to fix some kind of overarching maybe problem in society. You want to improve things. You want to change the world. I know that may sound idealistic, but you can do that through these types of means that I was just saying. I'm trying to think of other positions that would work for you. I should mention that something that goes along with this is Sagittarius midheaven is a very charismatic position. So you may experience kind of a boost of charisma when you are in your career or in public. You can handle the spotlight. I think this may be unusual for you because like we talked about, in much of the rest of your life, you may be alone a lot, kind of a loner at times. But professionally, career-wise, as long as it's something you're passionate about, you may thrive when it comes to teaching, lecturing, being in that kind of center stage where you can explain your findings. Last thing I'm going to say about that is Moon conjunct South Node in Aquarius in 12th house. There's the potential, well, not just potential. I would speculate that you've already, achieved a really unique understanding of the world through, really rich information, complex information. It's thorough, it's profound. A lot of it is very factual, but it's also spiritual in nature or metaphysical, something like that. So, a lot of this may come from a very private place, but if it remains just private for you, then what good is it? You know what I mean? Like, it may be great for enriching your life. That's definitely awesome, for sure. But, how great would it be to apply that, to help people, to spread the word, something like that. So I guess that's all I can say is preacher, professor, teacher. Those are the main things I see. Something like newscaster, I'm a little bit less excited about for you because it's not really as hands-on. It's still kind of indirect. And then also, I don't think you'd necessarily be covering things that you're really passionate about. So, yeah, I'm trying to branch out, but all I can think is teacher, preacher, something that fulfills a role like that, if that makes sense. Okay, let's talk about romance. We haven't talked about that at all. So, what kind of person would you be attracted to? What kind of person would you best work with in a partnership long term? What do I see the ideal relationship looking like for you? All that and more. So, okay, so let's talk about Venus, Mars, and the descendant. So Mars is, our sexuality, our ambition. I could have mentioned before, Mars is in Scorpio. It's in domicile, so it shows that you have a lot of ambition for sure, a lot of passion, and that you can be an intimidating defensive fighter, not just physically, but mentally, in all capacities. But Mars and Scorpio, it's also very sexual placement. You have Aries Sun as well. That's, there's a lot of sexuality, a lot of passion, a lot of drive in those placements, a lot of instincts. So you will be that attraction, that sexual attraction for you is going to be in other people who are also very instinctual, very passionate. So definitely other people who have Scorpio placements. But it could be other water signs as well. Pisces in particular, you're going to relate a lot to. You could communicate with them very easily because you have your Mercury and your ascendant there. So it would be very easy for you to be friends with Pisces. But also because Pisces is emotional and sensitive and passionate, like Scorpio, it's a fellow water sign, there could also be sexual attraction with Pisces too. So far, Pisces, I'm really looking at. That could be a potential sign romantically for you or friendship-wise too. Scorpio, definitely the attraction is there for Scorpio. Scorpio is interesting for you too because it squares Aquarius where your moon is. So individuals who have major Scorpio placements, you won't always agree with them. You may kind of butt heads at times, but that can actually be really great for attraction and, chemistry, especially more kind of sexual chemistry. So yes, that is a square aspect. It is contentious, but that contention can drive attraction. So Scorpio, I'm definitely looking at. Pisces, maybe. Pisces would be a more stable, less dramatic, less exciting, but more dependable type of friendship or romantic relationship. Let's see. Oh, one more thing about Scorpio. It's ruled by Mars, just like your sun is. So you'd have a lot in common with them, but enough different that it would be interesting, and there'd definitely be a lot of attraction there. So that could definitely work. Pisces could maybe work. Of course, when I'm talking about this, everyone has an entire birth chart just like you do. So of course, you'd have to see their whole chart to really assess compatibility. But just looking at them by sign, Scorpio and Pisces, a lot of compatibility. Pisces leaning more toward friendship, Scorpio leaning more toward sexual attraction and desire. Okay, since we're talking about the water signs so much, going kind of riffing off your Mars here, last water sign we haven't talked about is Cancer. So Cancer would be emotional and sensitive like Pisces or Scorpio since it's a water sign. That level of instinct and emotion could be attractive to you, but I'm definitely less crazy about Cancer for you because Cancer is very different from Aquarius. You have Aquarius moon and south node. Aquarius moon and south node like we talked about. So you're deep down, you can be very detached. You're not always one to, launch into displays of affection or emotion. You may be a little bit more hesitant about expressing emotional matters with others. And Cancer is the most emotional sign, I would say. So I really don't see a lot working with Cancer. Yes, Cancer is similar to Pisces or Scorpio where you have other placements. So there could be some attraction there. You could communicate with them kind of easily. But deep down, especially for a really close, like romantic type of relationship, they're going to have a lot different, from you. This relationship would require a lot of mutual understanding. I think it would be difficult in nature. Your Aries sun clashes with Cancer too, so you could be, you could unintentionally offend them or hurt them because you can sometimes communicate in a more blunt or straightforward way. It's not that you're meaning to be rude. It's just that you can be a little bit more detached than Cancer would be. So I'm really not crazy about Cancer at all. I think Scorpio or Pisces has more potential for you. Okay, so that I kind of went on a tangent from talking about your Mars, but let's talk about your Venus now. So Venus, I think, is even more important for romance relationships. Venus is your approach to relationships. It's also much of who you're attracted to. So Venus for you is in Taurus. This means that you're actually very consistent when it comes to relationships. Both your Venus and Mars and your Moon are all in fixed signs. So what you desire is very consistent. And when you are attracted to someone, when you are interested in someone, you really get locked in on them. You know what I mean? You really fixate on them and become very... You can be a little bit maybe possessive over them, and that's not a bad thing. You really want someone you can invest in, and you want stability too. That's something we're going to talk about a little bit later because your Venus, Mars, and Descendant are in Taurus, Scorpio, and Virgo, respectively. All of these signs either have a lot of stability or are desiring a lot of stability. So in other words, I think the one thread that runs through everything here, romantically and attraction wise, you want someone stable. You want something you can invest in. You probably want someone a little bit more down to earth and grounded than you are, because you can be so spontaneous and you can be so excited about ideas and information. You can get lost in your own mind. So someone a little bit more down to earth, more even keel, grounded, practical. That's what you really are attracted to, and that's what you'd work best with romantically, and with any partnership as well. What else? Venus in Taurus means that you're very strong-willed when it comes to relationships. You're not going to change yourself for anyone. I think that's all across the board. Your Venus, Mars, Sun, and Moon all suggest that you are very strong-willed. You're not going to change yourself for anyone. It goes back to that autonomy that you have. So someone else who either is receptive to that level of strong-willedness or also has that themselves is going to work really well with you. So, for example, Venus in Taurus means that you're attracted to people like Taurus, people grounded, practical, stable, consistent, maybe a little bit stubborn at times, strong-willed. That's what you're attracted to, and that's what you embody more or less when you're engaging in a romantic situation. So, in short, people with strong Taurus placements could, you'd be attracted to them, and that there could be potential for a romantic relationship there. Scorpio also squares Aquarius just like Taurus squares Aquarius just like Scorpio does. Taurus is that sign of attraction for you where your Venus is. So again, Taurus or Scorpio, since they both square Aquarius, they're both can be strong-willed, consistent. You'll have a lot in common with them in those types of regards, that the strong-willedness, the consistency, the little kind of stubborn streak. But again, Taurus or Scorpio, you're gonna butt heads with. You're gonna disagree at times. You'll still understand each other, like you'll understand what each other is saying, but you may still disagree. So I think that can actually be great chemistry. Like I said with Scorpio, the same thing applies with Taurus. There could be excellent, just enough friction to make it interesting, enough different for you to be kind of complementary. You'll still understand each other, but there'll be enough difference there to make it kind of exciting and passionate. So far Scorpio, Pisces, Taurus, those are potential signs for you. But then the one placement I look to more than any other is the descendant in Virgo. You have Pisces rising. So again, in the relationship, the way I see it working is you would be the person who's more spontaneous, more creative, more imaginative, maybe more sensitive. And ideally, you'd work with someone who is your rock, someone who's more stable, grounded, practical. They might be the more responsible one when it comes to, managing like money or, day-to-day, the mundane stuff like that. There's someone who can help keep you grounded. And especially because you have Venus in Taurus and descendant in Virgo, these are both Earth placements. So that's kind of where I was saying you're really requiring stability, groundedness, practicality. Someone who has major placements in Taurus or Virgo or maybe Capricorn. Those are all the Earth signs. Also, just in general, you do tend to lack Earth energy. You only have Saturn and Venus in Taurus. You have no other Earth planets. So that will make Earth signs that much more attractive to you because they have something you lack. You can be so, intelligent and, genius. You can be so creative, so passionate, definitely a lot of passion for you. But, kind of what I'm getting at is you may sometimes lack that groundedness, that, being down to earth and practical, bringing it all back. Let's bring it back to earth. Let's bring it back to the senses. Let's be, in the here and now, the present. Earth signs will help you to unlock that kind of side of you that, you may otherwise have difficulty connecting with. And likewise, you may help them to kind of branch out. Earth signs can sometimes be, if they have a lot of Earth energy, they may be always stuck in the mundane, in, work and money and things like that. So you may help them to branch out and realize there's something more there. So I think Taurus and Virgo especially, maybe Capricorn, they can, it would be mutually beneficial. There'd be an opposites attract dynamic. What else? There'd be a lot of attraction since they're, you'd be kind of different from each other. Taurus, I think, would generally be easier because of the way it fits with your other placements. Virgo, there'd definitely be attraction there. You could definitely work as a partnership, but it may sometimes be difficult unless they have a very specific setup in the rest of their chart, because Virgo is so practical, so modest. It's very conservative. So your placements in Aries, Aquarius, and Pisces, they're all much more experimental, more radical. So there could be an opposites attract there, as long as you have someone with Virgo or other Earth placements, someone who's open to that level of variation, variability, spontaneity from you. As long as someone's open to that, it could definitely work. But many people who have strong Virgo energy will not be open to that. Many of them want consistency or routine. So it could depend, I guess, is what I'm saying. But Virgo will share that intellectualism with you, that they're also intellectual like you are. They want to learn, they want to fix things. So you're both similar in that regard. It's just that you do these things from a more abstract, theoretical, experimental perspective, whereas they do it from a more practical, like mundane approach, if that makes sense. So hopefully that wasn't too much information, but Virgo, Taurus, these are potential signs for you, as well as Scorpio or Pisces. In general, I think you need earth and water. So if you know astrology at all, I'm sure you probably do to some extent. Earth and water signs, I think, is what you're mostly attracted to. They will complement you. But really quick, let's talk about the other elements and your attraction with them, or compatibility, or lack thereof. So let's talk about the fire signs first. So what's interesting is you actually you have Sun in Aries, which is a very strong placement. It's exalted there. You've got Jupiter in Aries, Pluto in Sagittarius. Those are the only fire planets, though. So like we talked about earlier, you're much more dreamy, introspective, intellectual than a typical fire sign would be. So other people who have major fire signs, you will relate to them in the sense that they are outgoing, they're direct. You will soak that up. You love the directness, being direct, being transparent, being straightforward. I think it looks like you could be very blunt. So you may be very receptive to that confidence, that transparency, and the strong-willed nature from fire signs. That will be very easy for you to be around and to reciprocate. I see it being more of a friend dynamic, though. I don't see that as being an area that, it's not necessarily an opposites attract area. You have enough in common with that to me, I see it being more of a friendship dynamic with Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius. Aries is where your sun is, so of course you're going to have the most in common with them out of any fire sign. So to me, that's the most chance of a friendship, but not so much a romantic dynamic. You're going to be more friends, really. Just because you have so much in common, it's very comfortable, it's very easy. There's no tension at all. There's no, you know what I mean? There's not that kind of attraction. Leo's going to be similar, but you have your North Node there. So Leo's at different times in your life, or people who have Leo placements, people who are confident, strong-willed, fiery, outgoing, passionate, they may help you to learn something. They may be kind of a mentor for you, especially when it comes to, being in the world, being hands-on. Leos are very direct, very confident, very engaged with the world. So they may help you to learn either by example, or they could help you as a mentor or something. They may help you in that area. I think this makes it less likely for you to have a romantic dynamic with a Leo, though, because they're going to be, you don't necessarily want to be learning lessons all the time from the person you're romantically interested with. I think that can be a turnoff. It's not sexy necessarily. It could be beneficial for you in other ways, but I don't see a lot of, romantic potential with Leo necessarily. And then Sagittarius, lastly, you have your Pluto in midheaven there. So they may be, people with Sagittarius placements may be very intense for you. And they may help you with your career maybe. But, at the end of the day, you're going to relate to them because you are a fire sign as well. They're also intellectual like you are too, so you could have really great conversations with them. But I see it being more friendship or maybe professional more so than romantic. And then lastly, let's talk about the air signs. So Aquarius, Gemini, Libra. This is really a similar. It's you're gonna hear me say a lot of what I said for the fire signs because it's a similar dynamic. You have Moon in Aquarius, you have South Node there. Not a whole lot else in the air signs though. Uranus, Neptune, and Aquarius too. But so other people who have Aquarius placements, you're going to relate to them really well, probably more so than any other sign because of the combination of Moon and South Node there. So it's going to be familiar to you. You know Aquarius energy. You've dealt with those things in past lives. So other people who are eccentric, intellectual, detached, who are maybe kind of a black sheep, who are, independent, a little bit rebellious or kind of provocative. I notice people who have strong Aquarius energies are often quietly rebellious. They are rebellious in subtle ways. That may be very tantalizing for you because it's very familiar. You are that way too, so it's going to be easy. When you have someone who has placements in the sign of your moon, there's a deep level of mutual understanding that comes there. So that can be very refreshing. It can be great to come to, when you're feeling weak, just to come to an easy friendship. But again, I see it being more of a friendship. Unless there's other things going on in their chart, it's going to be more of a friendship. It's not going to be romantic, really, because you just relate a lot. They don't have anything that you lack and vice versa. There's no complementary dynamic. There's no opposites attract. It's just relating. It's comfortable. It's easy. There's no friction. What else? And Gemini and Libra are kind of similar. I don't think you're going to be attracted to those signs because they are, they're the more fickle air signs. They're known for being very fickle out of the entire zodiac. They're, constantly changing their minds. They're not really strong-willed signs in the sense that they're going to be really confident and commanding or very consistent at all. You desire consistency. You want that groundedness. You're just not going to get that from Gemini and Libra. I would rank Gemini and Libra as the least romantically compatible signs for you, unless there are other things going on in the chart that are very different, which of course could be true. There's not an opposites attract there. They just don't fit with what you're attracted to, what you need in a long-term relationship. If anything, I could see you being friends because you do relate in the sense that you're intellectual, you're detached, you're cerebral, you like learning. You could probably have some really great conversations, intellectual conversations, because, they're going to know a lot of the things that you know. They may know, a lot about many different things. So it could be great for conversations, maybe good friend-wise or acquaintance-wise, but romantically, I really don't see that working for the air signs in general, but especially Gemini or Libra. I should mention too that one of those signs that you're is more of a friendship sign for you, like Aquarius or Aries, that could be part of something romantic. For instance, like if they have maybe Aquarius Sun, but then they have other major placements in some earth or water signs, then you would have the friendship and relatability, but also they'd have those grounding qualities too. So that's where, it gets complex. But in a nutshell, that's how I see your compatibility working. Okay, so I think we've pretty much covered it all. At this part of the reading, I'd just like to, tie up any loose ends, go back to anything that I didn't have the chance to talk about. But I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. I think I really did. So, definitely let me know any feedback you have at all. But in short, very independent person. I'm sure you've gone down many rabbit holes and have a very unique experience in general, unique understanding of the world. And you're meant to use that to help people or change the world in some kind of hands-on way. So really interesting stuff. I do appreciate this opportunity to read your chart, and let me know any questions you have, any feedback at all. I'm always open. We can continue our dialogue via email, or if you have more questions or need clarification, I can always maybe do a follow-up video or what have you. I'm always open to that. Okay, but super interesting stuff. Hopefully this helps you or is at least just kind of interesting or confirms a few things. Okay, see you later.